a luxury hotel tried to force my historic cafe to remove its outdoor patio until I uncovered a charter exemption from 1950. In the hospitality industry, longevity is the ultimate measure of structural success. I am the second-generation owner of the Brick and Ivy Café, a historic culinary staple located in the heart of our town's oldest commercial district. For over 7 decades, our defining feature has been our outdoor cobblestone courtyard patio, shaded by ancient oak trees, where generations of locals have gathered for morning espresso and artisanal pastries. However, to the corporate executives of the Regent Apex, a sprawling, ultra-modern luxury high-rise hotel that recently built its 20-story tower directly adjacent to our lot, our lively courtyard was viewed as a direct threat to their pristine, sterile aesthetic. The hotel's general manager attempted to weaponize a newly enacted municipal noise and spacing ordinance to legally force us to dismantle our outdoor seating. What their corporate legal team completely overlooked was that modern municipal codes cannot retroactively erase the foundational legal protections of the past. And my journey into the town's 1950 archive vault was about to freeze their corporate overreach completely in its tracks. Running an independent brick-and-mortar business requires an immense level of operational discipline. My parents founded the Brick and Ivy Café in a beautifully preserved mid-century masonry building, and I have spent my entire adult life ensuring our operations remain pristine, compliant, and deeply integrated into the local community. Our outdoor patio isn't just an aesthetic feature. It accounts for nearly 40% of our total seating capacity and is the primary driver of our weekend morning revenue. The conflict began 6 months after the Regent Apex opened its doors next door. The hotel catered to high-profile corporate clients and luxury travelers who paid premium rates for absolute seclusion. Almost immediately, the hotel's general manager, Alistair Vance, began looking at our cafe with visible disapproval. Vance was a career corporate executive accustomed to complete control over his environment. He first sent a series of polite but incredibly condescending emails, suggesting that we eliminate our outdoor espresso machine and restrict our patio hours to avoid disturbing the ambiance of the hotel's outdoor lounge area. When I politely but firmly declined to alter our decades-old business model to accommodate his temporary guests, Vance escalated his strategy. He bypassed personal communication entirely and deployed the hotel's corporate legal team to scour the city's newly updated municipal code. Just the previous year, the city council had passed Noise and Public Space Ordinance Section 402, a modern regulation designed to limit commercial outdoor dining spaces within 50 feet of an active lodging structure to manage urban density. On a busy Friday morning, right in the middle of our peak breakfast rush, a uniformed city code enforcement officer marched onto our patio. Backed by a formal complaint filed by the hotel's legal representatives, the inspector pulled out a digital tape measure and verified that our historic courtyard sat exactly 12 feet from the hotel's property line, well within the modern 50-foot restriction zone. Without hesitation, the inspector issued a formal administrative citation and an immediate order of non-compliance. The document stated that the Brick and Ivy Café had exactly 14 days to completely remove all outdoor tables, chairs, and shade structures, or face escalating daily fines of $1,000 and an immediate suspension of our primary commercial operating license. Alistair Vance watched the entire interaction from the pristine glass balcony of the hotel's second-floor lobby, a smug, entirely satisfied expression on his face as he raised his coffee cup toward me. He believed that the sheer weight of a modern municipal ordinance backed by a multi-million-dollar corporate legal fund would easily force a small business owner to fold. My assistant manager was in absolute panic, staring at the citation and calculating how the loss of our outdoor seating would completely destroy our profit margins and force us to lay off half our kitchen staff. But instead of engaging in an emotional argument or panicking over the deadline, I looked at the historical architecture of our building and felt a calm, analytical focus take over. Modern municipal codes are powerful, but they operate under strict constitutional boundaries regarding pre-existing properties. I knew that our cafe had been serving customers on that exact cobblestone footprint long before the hotel's foundations were even a blueprint. I closed the cafe's administrative office, grabbed my corporate registration files, and drove directly to the municipal records vault downtown. I wasn't looking for a modern loophole. I was looking for the foundational historical framework that established our town's commercial infrastructure in the first place. The municipal records vault downtown was located in a windowless basement beneath the county courthouse, a space completely untouched by modern architectural trends. While most modern legal disputes are fought using quick keyword searches on a digital database, city digitization projects often only cover records back to the mid-1980s. For anything older, you have to request the original physical ledgers from the archival staff. I spent 2 days under the harsh basement lights, systematically tracing my property's parcel identification number back through layers of zoning amendments, urban renewal maps, and property divisions. The city's modern case against my cafe relied entirely on the assumption that our patio was a flexible, modern addition subject to contemporary spacing restrictions. But on the afternoon of the second day, the archivist wheeled out a heavy, canvas-bound ledger labeled Township Incorporation and Charter Manifest, 1950. As I turned to the section covering the historic market district, I found the original legal framework for my exact block. In 1950, when the town officially transitioned from a rural borough into an incorporated municipality, the city council had to reconcile several pre-existing historic businesses with the newly drafted urban grid. To protect the foundational businesses driving the local economy, the council had embedded an explicit, ironclad legal clause directly into the town's foundational charter. Right there, under Section 14, Special Commercial Parcel Protections, was an explicit layout of my property footprint. The charter stated, the commercial parcel designated as Lot 4, the brick and ivy structure and its contiguous stone courtyard, is hereby granted a permanent, irrevocable municipal variance. The outdoor assembly and culinary service footprint is recognized as an indivisible structural asset of the property, entirely immune to subsequent municipal setback or spacing alterations, provided the original masonry boundaries remain unaltered. I sat back in the wooden archive chair, a wave of absolute clarity washing over me. This wasn't just a standard grandfather clause that a clever city attorney could argue away based on public safety. This was a foundational charter exemption built directly into the legal DNA of the city itself. A modern ordinance passed last year could not retroactively invalidate a constitutional charter right established nearly 80 years ago. I paid the county clerk to produce 3 certified, state-stamped copies of the 1950 Charter Manifest, alongside the original microfiche structural maps of our block. I packed the documents into my leather briefcase and headed back to the cafe. I didn't call a lawyer, and I didn't file an administrative appeal. I simply waited for the 14-day compliance deadline to arrive. The morning of the deadline, the patio was packed with our regular Friday crowd. At exactly 10 in the morning, Alistair Vance stepped out of the luxury lobby of the Regent Apex, accompanied by the same city code enforcement inspector and 2 municipal laborers carrying orange barricades. Vance looked completely confident, adjusting his tailored suit coat as he walked directly toward my outdoor counter, ready to witness the forced closure of his independent neighbor. "Time is officially up, Morgan," Vance announced, his voice carrying clearly over the sound of our espresso machine. "The city gave you 2 weeks to voluntarily clear this courtyard. Since you've chosen to ignore an official municipal ordinance, the inspector here is authorized to cordially seal off this seating area and initiate the daily structural fines." The code enforcement inspector stepped forward, pulling out a roll of yellow enforcement tape. "Morgan, I need your staff to immediately instruct these patrons to vacate the brick courtyard so we can secure the restricted perimeter." I didn't argue, and I didn't raise my voice. I simply reached under the counter, pulled out the certified copies of the 1950 Township Manifest, and laid them flat on the marble countertop directly in front of the inspector. "I won't be moving a single table." "Inspector," I said, keeping my tone completely level and professional. "And before you deploy that enforcement tape, I highly recommend you review Section 14 of the foundational town charter you are currently representing." The inspector frowned, picking up the stamped archival papers, as his eyes scanned the official 1950 municipal seal and the explicit, irrevocable structural immunity clause. His confident demeanor completely evaporated. He pulled out his reading glasses, reading the text 3 times over as his face grew increasingly pale. Alistair Vance's smile faltered. He leaned over the counter, tapping his finger aggressively against the wood. "Inspector, what is the meaning of this delay? The modern ordinance is completely explicit about the 50-foot restriction zone. This small business is in direct violation of city code. The modern ordinance is completely subordinate to a foundational charter exemption. Mr. Vance?" the inspector muttered, his voice dropping into a sharp, defensive tone as he stared at the certified documents. He turned to me, adjusting his cap. "Morgan, this document is fully certified by the county recorder. A standard zoning ordinance cannot override a charter protection of this tier. This citation is legally unenforceable." Vance's jaw dropped, his aristocratic composure instantly fracturing as he looked from the official town paperwork to the bright, crowded patio that he had spent months trying to destroy. But what the luxury hotel manager didn't realize was that my trip to the city archives hadn't just secured my patio, it had also exposed a catastrophic structural error in his own, multi-million-dollar hotel layout. The code enforcement inspector slowly adjusted his glasses, his fingers tracing the crisp, embossed gold seal of the 1950 Township Manifest. The air on the patio grew grew remarkably still as Alistair Vance stepped forward, his leather shoes clicking sharply against the cobblestones, his face tightening with a mixture of impatience and mounting irritation. "Inspector, we are completely wasting valuable municipal time here," Vance said, his voice carrying a practiced, corporate edge designed to intimidate city staff. "A modern zoning ordinance passed by an active city council automatically supersedes obscure historical paperwork. The 50-foot restriction zone is completely explicit. This cafe is in direct violation, and my legal team expects immediate enforcement action." The inspector didn't look up immediately. He flipped to the secondary archival page, the original structural blueprint map from 1950 that was permanently appended to the charter. When he finally raised his eyes, all the bureaucratic confidence had completely vanished from his expression, replaced by a cold, rigid professionalism. He explained flatly that a standard zoning ordinance cannot retroactively strip away a constitutional property right embedded in a foundational town charter. But then he leveled the real blow, informing Vance that by forcing his office out here to conduct a strict physical measurement based on the hotel's legal complaint, they had inadvertently opened a formal structural compliance review. According to the original unalterable township grid lines, the hotel's corporate legal team had completely miscalculated their own property baseline. Alistair Vance froze, his hand remaining suspended over the marble counter as the inspector pulled a high-definition digital overlay grid from his tablet and laid it directly next to the 1950 charter map. When the developers of the Regent Apex acquired the adjacent commercial block, their engineering team had relied entirely on the city's modern digitized GIS mapping system to maximize their footprint. They had constructed their 20-story glass tower, their concrete structural columns, and their multi-million-dollar luxury valet overhang right up to the exact edge of my building's brick facade. What their high-priced corporate attorneys had completely overlooked was a severe data conversion error in the city's digital files. The modern digital maps had flattened a curved, historic 3-foot utility and pedestrian right-of-way that ran directly along our shared property line. The 1950 charter explicitly established that this 3-foot strip was a protected municipal easement, dedicated in perpetuity to the preservation and maintenance of the historic market district. By building their massive concrete columns and cantilevered entryway directly against my wall, the Regent Apex hadn't just violated a minor spacing guideline. They had actively poured reinforced structural concrete directly inside a zero-tolerance historical easement zone. The inspector turned his back to our counter, his attention shifting entirely away from our outdoor tables and directly toward the towering glass pavilion of the luxury hotel. He pulled out a fresh stack of municipal paperwork, his pen flying across the pages with absolute legal precision. He announced that, effective immediately, the spacing citation against the Brick and Ivy Cafe was completely rescinded and dismissed with prejudice under Charter Section 14. Furthermore, he issued an immediate, non-negotiable structural non-compliance violation against the Regent Apex for direct encroachment of a protected historical easement. Vance's face drained of all color, shifting from a flush of arrogant confidence to an unyielding shade of pale. He stammered that it was entirely impossible because their engineers verified every single boundary line using the city's active digital database. The inspector replied coldly that their engineers had utilized inaccurate data, noting that under state property law, the foundational charter map is the ultimate legal authority. He handed the freshly stamped violation notice directly to Vance, advising him that the hotel had exactly 30 days to submit a formal structural remediation plan to the City Compliance Board, or the municipality would initiate an immediate suspension of their commercial occupancy permit. The fallout within the hotel's corporate hierarchy was swift, clinical, and utterly devastating for Vance. A 20-story luxury hotel cannot operate without an active occupancy permit, and the cost of physically demolishing and rebuilding their main valet entrance was estimated to run deep into the 7 figures. Rather than risking a public record-breaking lawsuit that would expose their immense structural negligence to their global investment boards, the hotel's executive legal team stepped in to handle the crisis quietly. Within 48 hours, Alistair Vance was permanently removed from his position as general manager and quietly reassigned to a minor regional logistics office 3 states away. The hotel's new management team approached my business with an entirely different posture. They formally dropped all opposition to our outdoor seating and signed an ironclad, court-approved boundary settlement. To avoid a catastrophic demolition order, the hotel agreed to pay an astronomical annual land lease penalty directly to my cafe's holding company for as long as their overhang remained in place. Additionally, they hired a specialized architectural firm to install a beautiful, transparent glass structural buffer along along our shared wall, completely protecting our courtyard's natural sunlight while leaving our historic cobblestones entirely undisturbed. Nearly a year has passed since the city inspectors left our block, and the heavy silence of corporate arrogance has been entirely replaced by a beautiful, thriving peace. The Brick and Ivy Café stands proud against the modern skyline, its historic brickwork untouched, and its vibrant outdoor patio completely filled with the chatter of our local community. Alistair Vance believed that wealth, modern scale, and a newly drafted zoning ordinance could easily erase a historic local landmark, but he made the fatal mistake of bringing a superficial narrative into an arena governed by immutable legal data. In the world of property compliance, a shiny new facade will never override a foundational truth, and the historical lines never bend.